With regards this debts now, taking care of the bonds rather, taking care of the debts, and let's not forget that this is a CBN bailout package still, in the side wings for them. Some states have already started accessing it, and more states in the days ahead will be opportune as long as they reconcile their papers and have all the numbers in check. But what do you think this will mean? Now the federal government, Big Brother, has taken care of your debt, your obligations, and then you have the Central Bank of Nigeria still going to give a sum of between 200 and 300 billion naira. What should they begin to focus on? What should be their priority?
Yep, I think what every state, so the states are into two problems. The first problem is that you have a low level of debt and hemorrhaging your revenues, cutting down your revenues. Now, between those periods, you have owed 6-month salaries. So, for example, a state that has an annual wage bill of 3 billion naira. So it's owed 6 months. That means you need like another 18 billion naira to even offset what you owe workers already. Then you had obligations to contractors. No, you had unfulfilled pledges to things like that. So basically, you might be looking for another more close to current deficit obligations, another maybe 25 billion naira. Now, you would take the CB, they would possibly access the CBN window to all clear that. When you clear that, and the question, that's why I said we need to take serious fiscal structural changes, because when you still do that, and you've cut down on your debt service, now you have more revenue from the source. When you still do all of that, if your recurrent expenditure, if it doesn't still match what you're spending on your recurrent expenditure, you will still be in trouble. You'll still be in problem in 4 months down the road. So, for instance, now you have more money from federal allocation. You have 3 billion naira, but your salaries are still 3.5 billion naira. Because reality, with the way we're going to, with the way the oil money, the oil revenue is going, we want to do more than 600 billion naira in a month. Even that would be a miracle in the next 6 months to do FAC allocation, to do above 600 billion naira in a month. So the question is, how are you going to manage that? And so that's why it's necessary that they take those fiscal structural changes to say, what are we going to do? Are we going to cut salaries? Are we going to, even if it's at the top, are we going to reduce even how we manage, are we going to merge ministries, reduce our commissioners, cut down on the number of car convoys that we use, number of aides and special assistants that we use, what's our overhead like, where are we going to make all those changes, because until the states begin to live lean, you can compare a Lagos state. The Lagos state should not live the way Gombe state lives, or even the way the Gombe state you cannot compare yourself with an Akwa Ibom. There's two different opportunities, or the two different revenue levels they have. So everybody must come together and think through how do we begin to act lean and very, very lean. I won't say cut salaries, that should be the only solution. That might not even be the solution. The solution, for some states, the solution could be the cost of governance that is wired around the government and the chief of staff and the governor of the state. And so how do you really be, because until we think through that, because if I was a state governor, I would say, give or take, I'm expecting that the revenue allocation for that will be shared in a month won't be more than 400 billion naira. And I would basically sit back and do my mathematics to say, this is how much, based on the formula, this is how much I expect to get. A state like Ogun State, if 400 billion naira is shared, will not get more than 3 billion naira in a month, inclusive of the local government allocation. And that's going to be the average for most states, 3 billion, 3.2, 3.4, 3.5, with the exception of the oil producing states that get up to 8 to 10 billion naira. And so you begin to plan with that clearly. So if 3 billion naira is what I would get from the federal government every month, how do I plan with that effectively?
How do you plan with that effectively, especially for some of the states who've been talking about vamping up their internally generated revenue, but in what aspects can they do it? Because you see, all of these states are not bereft of what they can tap into to get, that IGR for themselves to be not so much as a Lagos state, but at least get themselves to that comfortable level where they don't fall back to debt.
Yeah, so the IGR, there are two things. Now, the federal government also needs to play a bigger role. But sometimes the federal governments are not helping the states. So you have like an Osun state that has some gold reserves, but they can't tap into it. Because anything that has to do with mineral production, it stays with the federal government preserve. There's some things they can do around tourism because they still need to take some permits. There was a whole gigantic project in Calabar for the Tinapa Resort. And just to even get a permit, to make it tax-free took years and years. The Calabar port that was supposed to dredge to facilitate movement of ships into that space was not done by the federal government or the NPA. So sometimes the federal government, when the state says we want to diversify, we want to raise our IGR levels, there should be a special commission that is exploring how do you leverage on the strengths from the federal government and the state government to explore all of these things? Interesting in the APC manifesto, there's a part that was the 300 billion naira fund was supposed to be raised for regional development. And so this could be it, say, okay, every state come up with your plan. There's a 300 billion fund here. Come up with your plan to diversify your state. And let us support you with that. And because sometimes you need, these are not even things states could do alone. So you want to do a cocoa plant, you can get an investor and say, okay, let's co-fund it. The state is the minority interest in this. And you're providing the land, you're providing the expertise, the labor is going to be there. People are producing this, you can effectively.
Of course, and you bring in the DMO and you bring in the CBN, you bring all the financial regulators to look at, the finer prints, if you like to put it that way.
Yeah, the viability of the product. And gradually you begin to move like, okay, we want to make tourism so Ekiti, for instance, says we want to be a tourism spot. So they built a nice place in the Kogo Sea. But getting to Ekiti also is a problem. You have to drive maybe possibly from Lagos, or even getting a flight to Accra is a problem. So why not just put an helipad there and easily get people there and make that place a nice resort area? So we need people who think deeply. We need people who think in deeply. And the problem why we don't think deeply is we're all blighted by it's a 4-year term thing. And so the first 6 months you can't get that. We agree that most of the governors have not settled down till now in 6 months. I won't say that in 6 months. So you have like 2.5 years to work. Then the next one, last 1 year, you're planning for re-election again. And so the question is, when do you do critical thinking if we are all governed by short political cycles?
Well, this is a very long tenured bond. That is, I think, 2034 is when it's supposed to end.
It's a long time. You'll be grey by then.
That's if we're still here. But going forward and looking at from all everything that you've basically said here this morning, how should the various representatives of the states, I'm talking about the various citizens now, ensure that the state governments, the chief executives are put to task and ensure that yes, the federal government has ensured that this is off your hands. What more can you do for us? What more can we do together to ensure that we stay clean?
Yeah, transparency is clear, and this is something that will be enforced. I was having this discussion with the governor of Kaduna State, Malam Nasir Rufai, and he says, in times of scarcity like this, you see more transparency, because every state governor will have to explain to his citizens, this is why we can't do this. We need more transparency and accountability. Now, when you be transparent, people will ask questions. People will say, okay, why does it have to be? Now, accountability in a respectable manner, respond back to them that this is why we make these decisions. And we can all think through it together. And so that's where it's going to go around. So we need more transparency from states. For example, all the buckets of funds, you've taken LNG funds in the last few years, you've taken FARC allocations, now they're already distributing your bonds for you.
And even the World Bank is also, giving help to, help community development and the rest of it.
Yes, you're getting aid funds and like Edo State Assets, and that's $75 million fund. So you're getting all of that. You need to come back with more clarity and more openness and more transparency to say, this is how we are going to manage all of these funds. Adamawa did something recently where he says, this is why we can pay workers with 3.6 million. Or maybe a very terrible excuse was, but at least there was a sense of transparency, and then the conversation can now continue from there. Yeah.
Well, Sharon, thank you so much for coming on the program this morning and sharing your perspectives with us.
Thank you.
Well, that's the show for today. Many thanks for spending time with us. I'm Harriet Agbing. Bye-bye.